smile should be against the law. Makes me want to steal some of that joy.
Your eyes speak in secret code. Makes me want to decipher those thoughts.
Have to grab my water glass. Need to hydrate the love words, yet flow.
Flow is what I need in this dry place. Let your love words fill this empty space.
My heart is the gatekeeper, and my feelings are breaking out.
Let me be their refuge then. Find your safety in these arms.
The first step to your reach is hard. My emotions are drenched in sweat.
Need an ocean to cool it off. I'm hot and thirsty now. Merging in the flow of love, taking the plunge, surrendering to the moment.
A touch,
A taste, a warm embrace, taking us to savor love, face to face.
I gotta take off my jacket.
We've been working on this workshop or this topic for quite a bit. Actually, we went to a FAMU last week, and Walter Mosley was there as part of their Black to the Future program. And the reason we kind of chose this topic in part was Walter Mosley in his book, and I think several of you have seen this book. I've seen people bring it before. This year, you write your novel. He talked about poetry and the importance of it in his writing, because he'll tell you flat out, I'm not a poet. But he says, without a deep understanding of poetry and its practices, any power the writer might have is greatly diminished. And of all the writing, the discipline in poetry is the most demanding. Because poets have to use fewer words to convey a message, to kind of go on and express what they wanted to say. You need to talk about, now I'm going to let you jump in here before I start talking about Sultry and Sexy.
Okay, so what is poetry? Poetry has fallen into obscurity over the last century or so, and it's just really coming back, I think, in the last few years. You hear about poet laureates and poetry being good, but poetry, for the most part, people feel like, they think of Shakespeare, and they think of things that are convoluted along, and people like to hear poetry a lot of times, but don't like to read it. And I think sometimes we might have had bad experiences reading medieval poetry back in high school or something like that. But really, poetry is very, very individual and personal. I mean, there are maybe 100 different types of poetry. You have rhymes and odes, and you have, stuff, haiku, and you have all poetry from all different cultures and areas of life. So the first thing that we have to realize is that we have to lose that misperception of what it is. Because really, in my mind, every one of us in here is a poet. Because poetry is the rhythm of life. If we take one sentence out of Barbara's book, or out of your writing, or anybody's, it's poetry, that one sentence. And as Xavier just said, it's conveying that message in a short, concise manner. So that's one way to lose the fear. In the same way, we had to really work last night on narrowing down this presentation, because welcome poet, when you deal with sultry and sexy, I think sometimes those terms suffer from a misperception as well because of abuse, overuse, or just being outside of somebody's taste and preference. Sultry and sexy are things that we have to embrace in our own lives, in who we are. I said to Xavier, and he said, make sure you say this, that poetry is like a woman. You can't make her behave. You can't control poetry. Because at its essence, I think poetry is therapeutic. Poetry is a deep expression of what you're feeling, who you are, and that's going to come out the way it really is. that's the exciting thing about poetry. It's also the exciting thing about being sultry or sexy. Every one of us, man, woman, want to be sexy. We want to be sexy to ourselves and to somebody special in our lives. But we tend to shy away from that word in public because then it sounds like we may be going over the line. And again, that's because of maybe misuse and misperception. But when we embrace our sexiness, when we embrace our sultriness, we embrace our own poetry, we embrace who we are. So I guess the point, I would like to make the point by pointing out a couple of things to you. And we could have, when we started talking, we were like, oh, this is a whole workshop. But we're just talking about sexy and sultry right now. And I want to challenge you if you think that that's not so, although I think I'm preaching to the choir in this room. But read Songs of Solomon. Sultry and sexy, right? That's the Bible. Read the Psalms, poetry all through and through. You know? So, read other spiritual texts, the Tao Te Ching, the Bhagavad Gita, poetry, poetry, poetry. You know, so read Rumi and Hafiz and all of these people, and you will see that these are spiritual poetry that talk about the union with God and the bridegroom and the bride and all of these concepts that we usually reserve for sexual things. So the one thing that the poet has is this, as a writer, but more magnified, is the command and the control of a word to use it in every facet of its being, right? So, for instance, the word intercourse, used by people who are non-writers, would be like, oh, you said a bad word, or you said something. But intercourse is a conversation, right? It's much more than the sexual connotation. So in that way, we realize that when we talk about sexiness and sultriness, we don't have to be afraid. And like the artists who always lead the way in the revolution and the opening of people's minds to what we have as a people, the poets do that. And similes and metaphors are some of our biggest weapons, if you will, or you know, things in our arsenal. And if you look at the Psalms again, you'll see a whole lot of that. You talk about, you know, as the deer panted for the water, or something like that. There's all of these in there. So I could go on and on, but I won't. I won't, because I know you get the picture, and there's. Again, I know that we're preaching to the choir with that because there's so many poets and obviously all writers in here. But that's what, when people say, the last thing I want to say about that is songs, and I've said this before in here, but songs are basically poems. And sure, you could use a technical term and all that, but meter, rhyme, all of that has nothing to do with what a poetry is, or very little. It's one little part. And a song is nothing but a poem put to music. So when you hear somebody say, I don't like poetry, say, do you like songs?
Great song. I'll come back to that. Let me talk about the evolution of this topic, how we got to this moment. We knew we were up to do a workshop, and so at one of our meetings, I walked over to Dixie and I said, hey, why don't we do a workshop on poetry? Because I don't even like poetry. No, I shouldn't say that. I don't understand. I shouldn't say that. Let's do a workshop on poetry. And she said, oh, what kind? And I said, let's do sultry poetry. I was trying to see if she was going to go, oh, well, Alfred, I don't know. She went like, we tried this, no man. Let's do sexy sultry poetry. And to which I said, well, what about our more conservative members in our tan group? And then she said, oh, that's right, I forgot about Miss Barbara.
He's making this up here. This is the writer.
And then I said, well, we ain't got to worry about Miss Barbara. She told me to invite some of those street poets and doing the nasty poems and let them come in here and perform. Okay, she didn't quite say it like that. But in a nutshell, this thing kind of evolved, and we spent a lot of time kind of debating sexy, sultry, what's the difference, is there a difference? And you kind of heard Dixie's definition of that. Let me tell you what mine is when we were talking about it. I said, as a guy, a dude, I'm very much a dude, I believe. I tend to be visual.
Than a guy.
No, not really. I tend to be pretty visual. And so for me, when I was explaining to Dixie what sultry is, I said, Sultry is a woman in a designer gown with a slit up one leg all the way up to her vanity. Sexy is the same woman walking to your house while taking off that gown. So to me, that's a, okay, y'all got really quiet on that. Thank you, that was visual.
Good, keep going.
No, I'm done right there. So we were trying to balance that in terms of what are we going to talk about, what poems are we going to share, and even the exercise we're going to ask y'all to participate in later. I was going to do this thing about a song, but I'm going to skip that one. Dixie said earlier that true sexiness comes from such a place of union. And in the old days, men used to court women with poetry. I think we've kind of gotten away from that. I think now we just use lines from bad rap songs. Like that kind of thing. I think with that, what's up next? Do we go ahead and go?
Yeah, well, the thing that we want to tell you is that poem that we read at the beginning.
Yeah.
We actually met one evening, and the first thing we agreed on is that, well, if we're going to talk about sultry and sexy, we need to have something that is ours. So we sat down and wrote this poem. And I don't know if anybody around us, we were in a cafe, and so I said to Xavier, I said, you have to look into my eyes. And he goes, okay, because and I think what we found, because he's like, at first he's like, oh no, I don't know how to write this stuff. This guy is a poet and has a lot of stuff from years back, and I think that it's just the door opening to the revelation of all that treasure. But we were sitting in this little cafe, and at first he was resistant to writing, and then when I said, okay, look at me, and we looked at each other, and without it being at all sexual, it was,
Barbara's just trying to say
you know,
that was a good one, Barbara.
the matchmaker over there. I know.
Well, the heat is coming.
Yeah, I know, right?
That water's there for a purpose.
Hydrated. We reached this place where, because the first line was a smile, right? And I was smiling at him, and so he picked up on that and went a little deeper. And so I responded, and then it was easy. It came from a deeper place than, just kind of writing off the top of your head. And so, we're pretty pleased with the result of, and this is a one take. The only thing we worked on was the ending a little bit last night. I mean, we wrote it, bam, we're done. We came back to it last night and said, let's clean up the last line a little bit. And that, to me, is the ease, because I think a lot of people struggle with, okay, well, I'm going to have to go make something up, or, but it really isn't about that. And here's the other point. It's when we slow down to the speed of now that the poetry just flows. The poetry, and I keep saying the poet's nodding, because the real power of poetry is being in the moment, is being present and honest. Present and honest. Because you can write anything, fiction. You can write fiction and you make up an entire story, like Xavier just did about how this came about. but if you write poetry, there's an honesty to poetry that has to do, that is the therapy of it. And I will give you a quick example before we move on. Someone said to me, I was talking to a cousin of mine in another state, and she loves to write and read, and she's very eloquent, and we're talking about somebody who offended her, and she said, oh, that's okay. She said, I read somewhere, I think it's an old Chinese saying, she said, I just sit by the river and wait until the bodies of my enemies come floating by. Okay. And I was like, whoa,
wow.
the image wouldn't leave me. So it was so funny
That's
to me, because
to write on,
isn't that something awesome? So all week, at work, my cousin is well, she's fine, but you see, she's got the ability. And what I realized, what that gave me was, as I was going through the week, I was dealing with some stuff in some of the centers, and somebody called, and I'm like, I don't like. I say, I'll just wait till that body comes floating by. It was sort of almost a therapeutic aid to say, okay, I don't have to worry about it. Something bigger than me's got it. I'll wait till it works itself out. But the poetry, the imagery, leaves you with something that you can keep for quite a while. So that's the power of poetry. So we are going to read you a few other poems that we wrote in honor of this occasion, or maybe even before this, for those of us who really have been poets all along and simply introduced this topic to have his coming out party. Yes, I'm talking about you. So you're gonna go on to your.
Oh, okay, I gotta
It's
read it.
called "You Want Cheese
In them-
in Them Eggs, Woman."
Yeah, okay, we read this one a while back, but I'll go ahead and do it. We thought it was apropos for this session. Bob, did you see the look on Bob's face? You want cheese in them eggs, woman. Here's hoping the sweetness of goodnight kissing you turns into, hey baby, good morning, bid you sleep well, you. The grits, the eggs, the toast, be feeding you, nourishing that real, that caring, that hopeful you. In a place where the luxurious high thread count comforts you, beside the warm soul of a man willing to nurture you. Here's to taking your hand and strolling to your car, basking in the wonderful aftertaste of you. Before opening the door and bowing to the majestic goddess that is you. Here's to smacking and palming that fat 100% grade A sister's ass of you. And laughing as you chastise me with a, boy, you so mannish you. Here's to recognizing one night stands are for the trifling and the losers not worthy of you. And here's letting you know that I'm grown enough and committed enough to be the champion of you.
Lovely.
You wrote that?
That's actually in my trifling that I haven't published yet. That's actually in the book itself.
See, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
That was good.
Oh,
You wrote that years ago.
Man,
Hey, you
that's
have-
a
you
poem
have-
that gets someone
that's
to
a-
fall in love
I'm
with
gonna
you.
go write me a poem on you.
That's a Valentine's Day poem.
Yeah, that was a Valentine's
Exactly.
Day poem. Yeah, that could have been
Yeah.
published.
That's actually in the book whenever the book gets out, which was
Yes.
Well,
supposed to.
come on then.
I'm telling you, what's the hold up? I don't understand people.
Next.
So here's the thing, and as I said, Xavier's instigating all of this. So a year or so ago, I think when we did our last workshop, I forget why, but somebody gave, I think Barbara gave us a prompt or something, and I wrote something about nefarious.
Yes.
And he's been harassing me about the word nefarious ever since.
I didn't know what it
So-
meant then, I know now.
So I decided, I was talking to him on the subject, and I said, okay, I said to him before I wrote it, I said, okay, I'll explain, I'll give it to you because I have a poem about nefarious. So I wrote Nefarious Love. So again, my prompt was just that one word and went from there to that. And how does love sometimes turn dark or ugly in the physical sense? So this is Nefarious Love, keeping with the theme of sexy and sultry. Shirtless and dripping, he came to me like a god, fresh from the raging seas, wild with passion, wanton with wanting, consuming every part of me, taking my body to rape my soul. He was the devil, but beautiful to behold. When his passions were abated, his beauty would turn to stone. He held no joy beyond his lust, no interest beyond his carnal fires. And when I spoke of heavenly things, he seduced me with desires. This God-man covered my quivering flesh with a beauty of his own. He reached inside the sacred space to tear the altar down. He sought my heart, my body, mind, to claim them as his own. He loves me, hurts me, hates me, bleeds me. Then he cries and says he needs me. But his love can never free me. It goes no farther than his desire. His beautiful body, vile as sin, is his unholy throne. A wanton delight that seeks the light it can never own. The depravity of love is no love at all, but fallen faith and empty sound.
Excellent.
Ooh.
I can't snap my fingers.
And really what we wanted to do was we wanted to emphasize the tastefulness of sexy and sultry.
Exactly.
You know, and what we found, I guess, which is probably typical, is that I was not really wanting to go up to the line, and somebody was bucking the line, you know. So, and that is probably as it should be, and how we enjoy it. But what we want from everybody, though, is for you to be thinking in that vein. It's sort of like, here's the example. If I put on some mellow jazz, everybody would maybe kind of slow down in the chair. If I put on some, really booty shaking, we might start to tap. And if I put on some, some of those 70s and 80s love songs that some of us may know really well, the groove, the mood changes, right? Our mood changes, and we're affected by that. In the same way, it's what level, what will move you to that place of awareness of your own sexiness, your own way in which you are sultry, and bring that out into the written form. What is it that, again, that's slowing down and being comfortable enough in your own skin to express it on paper, right? That's what our aim is with this, is to not be so worried about the lines, knowing that we're not going to offend or bore. We're not going from one extreme to the other. We want to be somewhere in the middle. Are we awakening that in you? Because we don't want it to be an analytical process where now you're afraid of is this okay? Now that we've established that it's okay, where is it in you? When do you become, bless you, excuse me, when we ask you in a few minutes to start writing, what is that process churning inside of you because you're in the flow of the moment?
Walter Mosley, I'm sorry,
Yeah, no, good.
says you don't have to be good at writing poetry. He said, in fact, your poems can be bad. Bad. He says it's not the point, it's the process. And to get yourself comfortable with doing, that's what he advocates joining these poetry workshops. He said, but what you will learn will include all the tools that can stand you in good stead when it comes to writing that novel you intend to finish this year. He said, write, even if it's bad. He took 5 or 6 poetry classes when he was in college just to learn. He said, it's a terrible poet. Terrible poet. That's what he said.
But you know what I got from that? That poetry is the seed of writing, period.
That's what I was hearing.
Right?
That's what he meant. That whole portion of his book is what it addresses.
And here's the thing about that. The beauty and the gem to take away from this is, in this busy world where we all struggle to get enough time to write, you can write a poem in a few minutes. And so you keep honing your skills. If you have to work and you take a break, you sit down and you write a poem. Even if it's about how your boss just made you mad. You know what I mean? It can be therapeutic while you're doing it. So that's, if you take nothing away from that, is that it's not going to be published in the New York Times. It just has to be that part that's really honing you.
Poetry forces you to be an efficient writer.
That's what you said?
No, Walter didn't say that. I said
Okay.
I wrote it. Now, if he claims that I want some royalties. Okay.
All right.
Please.
Yes. So we've got a couple more for you, and then we're going into the exercise. So get loose.
Hey, Barbara, speaking of pushing up against the line,
Okay, you
Just
ready to
bring it
cross it?
closer.
Are you ready to cross it? Or you just,
Bring it
or you
closer.
let us decide?
I want intimacy.
Mm-hmm.
I want a woman so loved by me that when she stands to speak to the members of her church usher board, she has to stop mid-message to sip a glass of water, to hydrate, to cool, to slow the shudder emanating from her glowing core. Core heated by the remembrance of a recent moment of my lips removing warm sweat from her.
Whatever.
She, her, woman please, mine.
Excellent.
Is that bumping up against the line?
Excellent. Right up there. Right
That's
up
not
there.
that's not no overline.
I need some wine.
That's a little bit of borderline.
I need a fan.
Memories.
They brought hydration. It's
It's all
better.
about
Hydration,
memories.
hydration.
It's all about
So-
memories.
So
Memories.
here's
Thank
the
you for
thing.
being here, brother. I'm so glad you're here.
You know what, though? There is no growth unless we push up against it.
Exactly.
Exactly.
That's true.
And what I really found, last night when we were meeting, I had this revelation. I'm like, this man tricked me. I'm being pushed as a poet because this is stuff I don't usually write. And I found myself being so tentative in an area that I thought I was very comfortable in. Because he was pushing up against the line, and then I realized, oh, I'm not even near the line. You know? And that expansion of who we are and what we do, we should be able to dabble in everything and then choose what's best for us and where, you know, dabbling it at our comfort levels. So that's, coming back to that, I thought, oh my goodness, I don't even have, I have a few poems, I have a lot of poems about love, but nothing so sexy or sultry. So I said, oh wow, you have stuff already ready. I need to write something sultry. And he's like, oh no, you don't have to. And I'm like, yeah, I do. So I sat there, and this is what I wrote. So this is an attempt at sultry. Softly, touch me when the rain beats on the roof with angry fingers. Gently, hold me when the moon rises above the grasping fingers of the trees. Tenderly, kiss me when there's nothing left to say. Boldly, take me when there's no place left to go, to that place where all is one.
Okay.
You wrote that like 3 minutes. Like.
And I was like, yeah, I'm a poet.
Oh,
right? But he challenged me in that, right? He challenged me in that being a poet. And I guess what I want to do is pass on that challenge to you in whatever area, if you know, whether or not this is your thing, or if it is your thing, the particular type of poetry to go beyond, because my poetry all tend to be either nature or spiritual stuff. And then I was like, wow, I never thought of expanding beyond that in terms of, you know, having that. And so, thank you for the challenge, and I pass it on to everybody. We just finished talking about poetry, in particular, sexy, sultry poetry, and the fact that poetry is really the seed and the root of writing, and that we have to embrace the idea of our own sexiness and sultriness and how that flows, and that it's not limited just to sexuality, but it's a bigger picture. And using that to spark the seed of your own writing of other things, and that to lose the fear, because poetry doesn't have to be good. It is therapeutic, it is a catalyst to other writings, it's a snapshot of a situation, and poetry is basically seeing a moment and expanding it. So I can look at you and say, you know, she came in, or I could say, the gray blouse reminded me of a cloudy day, you know, something like that. So I'm taking it beyond just that one thought, down into the feelings that go along with what we're visualizing. That being said, so we're moving to the exercise portion of it, and the bags you have before you, as you can tell, are from the workings of a depraved mind. So here is,
Thank you.
so yes, sultry and beyond. So what we're going to ask you to do, you want to explain the exercise on the depraved one?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Dixie touched on how objects can kind of trigger things in your writing, and even in poetry. And during our first meeting, I talked about what if we presented the members of TAN with objects or things and gave them a few minutes to write a sexy, sultry piece. Remember what Moses said, your poem doesn't have to be good, it can be bad. And she was like, well, what are you talking about? So I was trying to give her a frame of reference on something I wrote a while back. So I had, as we were getting these objects, I had a thing of deodorant, banned deodorant sitting on the table, and I explained to her how that triggered an image and something I wrote years ago about a guy in a bar. This girl was dancing, it was hot, it was New Orleans, sweat pouring off of her. She had a V-neck on, sleeveless top, and she threw her arms up in the air, and he was so infatuated with her, all he could think was, I can't wait to get close enough to her to lick the deodorant out from under her arms. So It's,
Your mind will never be the
it's
same.
exactly.
As I said,
It doesn't have to.
That's a perfect example of bad.
Frame is the way, yeah.
It just
frame
it frames a whole story though, but that's meant to pull you into it. You go like, whoa, what is this? Where is this going? And there's a whole other romance piece beyond that. That's why it hasn't been published. But as we got to talking, we started coming up with these objects. So what you have in your individual bags are objects and things that we're going to ask you to just take a few moments and write something sultry. It can be
Open.
you ready?
Well, here's the thing. We're going to do it in silence. And one of the things about poetry and about writing in general, right, is being comfortable in the silence. Having your time, not feeling like, well, we got to do something while we're doing it. So we just want you to relax. We'll give you like 5 minutes and just see what comes from you in that area. So yeah, if you have a pen, you can certainly write something about the color of the pen, but that's not the idea. Whatever the object is, how can you connect that with sexiness and sultriness and bring something out of that?
I wanted to do dirty poets.
Okay. So,
And,
so somebody vetoed the dirty. Just
Meaning you guys could have swapped out props, so to speak, but Dixie overruled me.
because here's a thought. I didn't want anybody to feel like, okay, now I have something, I have an idea. Now the stress of, oh, now something new. Because I want us to all feel relaxed enough with the idea to just write, take a few minutes and just be in that place of relaxedness where you flow and write something. And I want to really to lose the idea of good or bad poetry, because if Picasso can get away with calling that stuff art, then anybody can. Your poem is poetry. It's not good or bad. Like we don't have bad hair and good hair. We just have hair. So that whole thing of let's expand it. Then the judgment's gone. There's no judgment in it. So yes, open it and start writing.
I have a banana. The title of my poem is Banana Split.
Okay.
He was tasty, like all the flavors of a banana split. Chocolate ice cream, strawberries, and whipped cream filled my imagination and made me want to savor him. His sweetness was all I needed to satisfy my natural desires. Just one taste, just one lick was all I wanted of his banana split.
He charged my body like a 9-volt battery. I burned like a raging fire, consumed in a bonfire that melted the very core of my womanhood. Electrify me again before the heat goes out, cleanse my soul, purify my body, bring it back to the feeling of a newborn's touch, so that I can rise from the ashes. But I'm being so charged by the 9-volt battery and being melted into fine gold in the crust.
Wow.
How long you been married?
40 years?
I had Johnson baby powder.
Johnson baby powder.
Okay, she, nighttime, danger. I'm her baby. She wears the powder, she hides it in crevices, naughty places. No powder for me. I'm no baby no more. I'm a man, her man. It's her powder, it's her fragrance, but my pleasure, my passion. I hear her footsteps on the coal tar floor like she's walking on all powder. That would be a waste. The smell of her teases my nose. She draws closer. I'm anxious, I'm eager. It's her powder, but I'm her baby, I'm her man.
Man's perspective, huh? About the powder.
A box of Russell Stover chocolates with
I would say
the red
Valentine.
roses. Okay, Valentine. Okay, the sweet smell of red roses. The doorbell rang, and in his hands were 24 velvety red roses. The aroma filled the room as we embraced each other, expressing our love. At that moment, I knew the words flowing from his lips were true. He truly loved me. Candles illuminated the room as we gazed into each other's eyes. We smiled, we laughed as dinner arrived. The waiter, he entered the room with a beautiful meal. Another surprise he shared with me. And later, we embarked upon that moment that we had both been waiting for. The passion as we held each other close, my body next to his and his body next to mine. He held me, we held each other tightly, quietly, and drifted to sleep.
The sweetness of the syrup implores me to do the thing that I can't or will never do. This is the time to be free to tell the one next to me exactly how I really feel. This and many other things. This is my story of truth and consequences of life like I've never known or appreciated before. Sweet, flowing mixture of life.
All right, nice. Thank you.
That was sweet and tame.
Apple, apple, near to my heart. My stomach's growling. Hunger pains need to depart. As much as I like to lay you on the cool skin of my counterpart, I need to eat, don't care if the form ain't real hard.
You know what I'm seeing, I guess we'll talk about it in a minute, but I want to read it before I show you what I have, because the one thing that I think we can all see is how our image of what we have is so different, right? You see one thing and you think one thing and the other person thinking something different, but what do we pull out of the essence, and how sometimes it's our own minds that get us into the deep place that we're thinking rather than what the person is actually saying.
Exactly.
All right, so, hard, with just enough give to leave me hoping for more. A groove that leads me in an endless loop of wanting, bringing back memories of sunshine, a partner, and sweat running down the small of my back. Taut, like the stresses of my mind, I'm touching a doorway between then and now. Fuzzy, in that alien kind of way, like the way I lose my mind when that pleasure I can no longer find. Now, it may sound a little sensual and sexual, but it's a tennis ball. And the pleasure is playing tennis, right? And the hardness is the ball, not whatever else you were thinking. And you know, the sweat running down the groove of my back with a partner is playing tennis, right?
We get it.
But I'm saying, if you didn't know it was a tennis ball, or if I didn't entitle it with something that said tennis ball, your mind would go and stay in a totally different direction. So, wasn't that apple what we were supposed to use for the second prompt?
Stomach growling, hunger pains.
What we wanted to do now is just offer you one object. Everybody write something on it, right? And it doesn't matter. And as you can see, it's all good, right? It's all great stuff. So the definition of great becomes irrelevant because it's all great.
We only have 2 props left to say that.
All right, what are we gonna do? What's one of them? Oh, Lord of mercy.
What is that? Chapstick?
Chapstick.
Chapstick, yes. Talk about the challenge. All right, so let's take 5 minutes writing chapstick and then be prepared to share some of your own.
Out in the wilderness, dark and deep, nothing around us to hinder us, so we let it creep from the front of the car and to the back seat, with only a chapstick to ease the strain. Everything slipped into place without any pain.
That was very creative.
I don't know why I kept thinking of Bad Girls by Donna Summer when I started writing mine. This might sound a little funny, but here goes. Hey chap, can I have your time? My lips want to make you mine. I am dry, need your soft caress, need the stick that tastes so minty fresh. Smooth and healing, you're just what I need to fight the cold that threatens me throughout this night.
Wow.
Barbara and I looked at each other like, really?
And I kept hearing toot toot.
Mine is called Sweet Sticky Lips.
Sweet sticky thing.
Yeah.
Which soundtrack?
Sweet, which one?
Okay, specifically.
Sweet Sticky, yeah. A cherry-flavored kiss is all it takes to relieve the stress of, should I? Will she? Our well-thought plans have deserted us. We stand waiting for time to propel us to our destiny. A desire conquered by trepidation leaves us wanting. But Eros, with his quiver of jollies, comes to the rescue with a gel-covered stick.
So whether anybody wants to claim it or not, we're all poets, right? And to me, the most beautiful part of this exercise has been the silence and watching everybody just, do their thing from within, in the space, with everybody around us, but still being within ourselves. I think that was probably, there was just such unity in that. And then the variety that comes out, right? And it's all good. And I think if anything that writers need to realize is that it's all good. That no matter what phase or stage it's in, sure, it may not be perfect in some senses, but it's all good. And I do hope that we'll all kind of incorporate poetry as therapy and as practice to keep honing that writing skill when we don't have time to write. But I guess what we want to do is sum up this portion, the actual sexy sultry poetry, and ask you guys to share so that it's not limited to that. That's why this last exercise was like, okay, you can go outside of sexy sultry, because if you're still not feeling it, or if you just have some other things, obviously poetry is much more than just that. But I also hope that it was a fun of knowing that, we can, and everything that we shared was tasteful, and yet some of it was very provocative, titillating, but still tasteful.
Part of this exercise, though, was to also kind of push you outside your normal comfort zone.
No matter how hard you resist it.
Yes.
That was a big part of it. And for us, even putting the exercise together, we had several hours of prepping for this thing. We really got caught up in this whole, how do you balance sultry, sexy, and even the spiritual component? How do you kind of balance those things? We had some nice, hard discussions. I finally won one battle out of 10, I think. But again, thank y'all for participating. We were concerned with people really be uncomfortable kind of going there. But this was really tasteful. I was really surprised and shocked by some of y'all.
Yeah, and the other thing is to realize that you can make poetry out of anything.
Yeah, exactly.
And that prose engages the mind, but poetry pulls on the emotion and the heart. So the other thing is, part of it is that when you're writing poetry, to realize that the shorter you make your poem, the more power you have to pack in it, the more concise you have to be. And for me, that's like haikus, they have this 5-7-5 rule for haiku. And it's a big challenge to get exactly what you want to say in those, 17 words. And you find yourself playing with, blending words or whatever, doesn't become does not, so you can make it. But you end up with a powerful statement of what it is. So if this were a workshop, we would play with stuff like that, but we just want to remind you of all of that being out there. I also want to remind everybody that, is it Monday night or Tuesday night? There's spoken word at Nefertari, Keith Rogers, and it will challenge you. There's a girl that did a poem on Google and how it meets her every needs, and it was sounded like I love her. It was amazing. So check out some of the community resources.
Haiku? Oh, yeah. Elaine she asked me when we had our first meeting at the coffee shop, she said, we should do haiku. And I grabbed the menu. I thought it was like calamari. What is that? So I've been educated. This whole poetry thing is a journey.
Yeah.
And move to the next one.
Yeah. So I wanted to say real quick, don't forget, I don't think it would be fair to mention poetry without mentioning Maya Angelou, or as I said before, Hafiz Rumi, and then those other resources. So whatever we read, great readers are great writers are great readers, so to expand it that way. Well, thank you all for coming. I hope you enjoyed it.
Yes, yes, I did.
Yeah.
Sorry, thank you.
Leave out to go back home. I need my screwdriver, my apartment.